Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Bruno Herman. I'm the proud member of the board of advisors at LT Innovate. So today I have the pleasure to moderate a panel on a very exciting topic, which is maximize your business impact by making your value supply chain multilingual. This is a huge topic. There are different facets to this topic. So we have a great panel today to discuss all these facets. What I would say is actually, again, that we're going to focus a lot on value. You will hear that word very often today because this is a value cast, but obviously we want as much as possible, share information, experiences, lessons learned about creating value with multilingual content supply chains. And again, the panelists who are invited today will be perfect people to talk about that and also to answer any question in the second part of this value cast. So let me start by asking the various panelists to introduce themselves briefly. So let me start with Rickard. Rickard, welcome. If you want
Thank
to
you,
go ahead.
Bruno. Very nice to be here. My name is Rickard Engels. I am the founder of Xilio and the founder of Lockup, which is a spin-off of Xilio. We are a content migration company, and that content migration company did migrations from any web content management system to any web content management system. And that technology we also now apply to provide integration solutions in the localization industry. More about that later.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Rickard. Thanks a lot. All right, next, I would like to invite Mayu to introduce herself. Hello, Mayu.
Hi, Bruno, and hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So yeah, my name is Mayu, and I look after localization at What3Words. So in that sense, kind of represent the client side, so to speak. We are a tech company from London, and our product is by nature multilingual, which it makes localization life quite interesting at What3Words, to say the least. So in short, we've assigned every 3-meter square or 10-foot square, if you're so inclined, on the planet, a unique address of 3 random words to make it easier to talk about precise location, no matter where in the world it is. And because this is essentially a new global way for everybody to talk about precise location, it naturally has to be available in numerous languages. We have a team of professional linguists crafting these 3-word addresses with local language experts, whereas myself, I look after the rest of our localization. So for example, marketing, user interfaces, etc., with a small team. And yeah, as I said, What3Words is a very, very interesting company to do localization for, because our product is multilingual. We've actually just launched our 50th language version just this week. So yeah, we had to start localizing for example, our marketing and consumer communications very early on, and the user interfaces before we had reached perhaps a better maturity stage, or at least the headspace, as a startup to back then to really figure out the best ways of doing localization. We had very limited resources as a small company back then, and so on. And that combined with I would say all the talk from the localization industry on what tools to use and how to optimize workflows and all of that, it actually made it more challenging, I found, to establish this localization function that worked at What3Words specifically, because it felt that much of the advice and generally accepted best practices just weren't suitable for a company in our situation. So for example, an expensive TMS wasn't realistic for us at that point. We had challenges with agency translators who didn't fully understand What3Words and how it worked. I would say, to wrap this short introduction up, I would say the most interesting thing about my and our localization journey at What3Words from these past couple of years has been this maturing process and establishing not just how we localize at What3Words, but I would say importantly how we perceive localization. It feels we have, as I said, lots of advice and best practices available that I feel are very focused on things like tools and automating processes instead of, directly the users and the global audiences that we have, and how you actually deliver value. So of course efficiency is important, but since those early days, I feel our localization has definitely come a long way, and we've established something that's very intentional, I would say, and user focused. And we've learned really beneficial ways of doing things from our non-localization teams, for example, iterating, testing our localizations, which I would say, yeah, that has been probably the single most important thing we've done in localization that has really, really delivered measurable value in the past few years. I think that's probably enough of an introduction at this point. But yeah.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Mayu, and congratulations for the launch that you had this week. Great.
Thank you.
Great. Always great to hear about new launches. Okay. And then last but not least, Harmut. Hi, Harmut.
Yeah, hi Bruno. Thanks for having me here. Hello to everybody from Germany. I'm Hartmut von Berg. I'm leading localization at LogMeIn. And picking something up that Mayu just said, so also our journey is about maturing localization as a function, moving it and up-leveling it towards a globalization consultancy. So going away from just being a sheer translation shop that you can request translations with inside the company. And so we've moved along, started optimizing our localization value chains, but more from an inside out perspective. So taking the existing processes, and we had to face the challenge of coming out of a merger. So merging two teams that use different technologies, both worked in localization. So the goals have been the same, but different states of maturity, different tools, different processes. So then we started in the beginning to just bring that together, and then started to look into how we can elevate the localization function and the value of the function itself, but also the value that we create, that we bring to the business. So how we can support growth, international and global growth of our products. That's the thing that I'm passionate about, and this is probably why I'm here today. So.
Absolutely. I love your introduction because you use the word value many times, so that's perfect. That's what I like to hear, and I think that's what the audience like to hear as well. Is really how we can really create and increase value with what we do in this area. So thanks again for these introductions. So if we move now to, or if we dive into the topic, let me go back to you, Rickard. You have a lot to share, and a lot of experience, and a lot of probably best practices to recommend. But let me start by asking you how would you define, or how would you summarize this topic, which is creating value with multilingual content supply chains and turning them into value driven supply chains. So I'll let you the screen.
Yeah, so that is let me share my screen. It is such an amazing topic, and I am very strongly opinioned about it. I always think, sometimes a little bit too strongly opinioned, maybe. But the point is, I am now in the localization industry for about 4 years. But I still am also the founder and CEO of Xilio. And Xilio does migrations to marketeers. So basically, I am talking to marketing directors mostly, And so that is the bread and butter of our business, and that is the industry that I really understand. The translation industry, I'm now 4 years in, and I think I understand it a little bit. I'm mostly intrigued by the industry because I think the industry has a massive opportunity for entrepreneurs like me. And that is that fundamentally, the industry is designed to control cost. And so everything that is like common processes that nobody questions, that is like, it's so normal because this is how we do things, they are not questioned. So things that are innovated are innovated within the existing process. But if you take I've taken an outsider glass, and I think like, okay, but everything has started from the concept of, okay, I am buying 3 million of words per year. I wanted to reduce the amount of words, the amount of money I have to pay per word. So I send out an RFP, and I send it to 3-4 people, or I send it to whatever, 10 agencies, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, I'm going to negotiate with a few LSPs, and I tell them, you have to reduce your rate. So what does the LSP say? It can't, because it's too complicated. But if you make it easier for me to get the content, then I might be able to reduce the rate. So hence, a TMS is born. So a TMS is born to make it cheaper for the LSP to translate. There's absolutely zero business value there. The only business value a TMS had in the past is to make it easier for the LSP to translate for a lower price per word. And now, of course, we're all used to using a TMS, so we use a TMS. And we think we need a TMS. And the new TMSs are user-friendly, and they're better, and they're more open, and maybe. But at the end of the day, why is there a TMS? A TMS is there because we thought we needed it because it was cheaper, because we needed to reduce the cost. And so that kind of triggers me in the industry, and that attitude is kind of now present in almost every activity, because it has been driven by, okay, I need to offer a lower price, otherwise I do not win the RFP. So what is the consequence of that? Are the translation agencies selling to marketing? No, because marketing doesn't decide. Who is deciding? Who is deciding who to buy? It's not, I mean, the localization manager, of course, decides a lot, but the localization manager should support the business. So it should be marketing or production or operations, but not localization management and not procurement that decide who is the winner. It should be the business that decides that. But if you want to win an RFP, realistically speaking, and I know this very well because I've been in many RFP, connectors are tick box. Do you have a connector for Adobe? Tick, done. Okay, you win. And but nobody asks, like, does the connector make any sense? But or is it any user friendly? No, it's just like marketing sits at the table, and the question is, can you work with this? Yeah, okay, you can go. So, and then the decision is going to be made by procurement. So what is the net result of that? That if you want to sell as a translation agency to enterprises, the result of that is that you need to have a very good relationship. Of course, we know that there's very tight relationship between enterprises and LSPs, and you need to have a good relationship with procurement. But the actual business, in all honesty, is kind of ignored. It's kind of ignored. And if I ask any of the marketeers, or if I look at any of the analysis reports that I have done in any migration, if they are happy with translation, there is not a single marketeer that says, yes, I'm happy. I'm happy. There's not a single one that says I'm happy. They might be happy with the quality of the content, but it's of course a very cumbersome process where we are forcing a marketing employee to send content to a localization engineer within a staff department, which then puts it into a TMS. And from the TMS, it's then put into kind of the TMS of the LSP. It's like, it's it's like there's a delay by default, and it's given as a normal, but I don't think that it should be normal. So anyway, so I think that this procurement necessity, it's not even that translation agency had a choice, because if you're chosen by the price per word, that this is your key ingredient, but that thinking has resulted in a staff mentality and in a value ignorance, and you have that kind of rhythm for 40 years, and this is why we now have a discussion like, why is localization not a value enabler yet? Because 40 years of history is not and it's a lot of habits. It's a lot of habits that needs to be removed. And thank God for new influencers like Hartmut and Mayu who are taking the lead here. And so I'm very, very pleased to join the panel with them, because they take the lead and say like, hey, localization is a value enabler. And but instead of just a staff department that where you go and you dump your content for translation and you hope it's coming back, because for most business people, for them translation is something that is like it works. Like it's not. It's like I send it to the printer, it comes back printed. I send it to the translation department, it comes back translated. And that there's a quality element to it. I know now because I'm in the industry for 4 years. But in the first 12 years before I knew about translation, I had no clue. In fact, how I came into translation, I sold my software to Tridion. I reached out to Tridion. I didn't reach out to SDL. I reached out to Tridion and I said, please partner with me. And then Tridion said like, you know what? We're going to partner with you on the translation side. I said, translation, why? Oh, we need a lot of connectors. Okay. But so I had no clue. I thought it was something that just existed. So anyway, so that was a long story. But what is now the reality of what is kind of the consequence of that? And so what I see. So if you take the method of how we translate into today's world. So how do we translate a website? How do we translate a website today? A website today is translated. If you take, for instance, Adobe Experience Manager, there's a plugin within Adobe Experience Manager where an end user selects a piece of content, says like, I want to translate this piece of content, and then boom, pushes it directly to the LSP. Now, why do we have it like that? Why is there not a vacuum cleaner approach that sucks out all the content automatically and sends it to the LSP? Why is this approach chosen? Yeah? This approach is chosen for 2 reasons. One, it's supposed to be user-friendly. Well, it's not really, because nobody likes it. It's 12 clicks. It's very user-friendly. Nobody understands it. But okay, it's chosen for user-friendliness. But secondly, what's the real reason behind it? Procurement has to be able to track down who clicked the I want to translate this button, because then you can allocate the cost of that page to the PO number of that budget. Yeah? So it must be driven by kind of, so it's again procurement that drove the translation method, and we see it as the holy grail. And I've been offering kind of automated connectors for the last 4 years, and kind of people constantly ask, but do you have a push-in connector within the CMS? Because that's the way we do it. I said, why do you want to do it like that? It makes no sense. You need to make 12 clicks. I don't know any marketer that likes it. No, but that's what the client demands. Because you don't talk to marketing. If you talk to marketing, nobody likes it. So, and I know it because I partner with CMS players, and they sell our connectors for us. And so they go in and they say like, do you like your translation automation? And the client says, no, I hate it, and it's very cumbersome. And then they say, upgrade to the latest version. We have a better version now. Yeah. So it's not a bullshit story. It's like this is nobody likes it, and but it was procurement that drove it. And but what is the consequence of that? What's the consequence of that in today's world? I show here a few pages. Let's take the elastic example. There's a digital marketing person in probably China or in America that has a press release, and she thinks like, you know what, I don't need to translate this press release because it's only relevant for America. But what she doesn't understand is that in the headless world, things are automated, things are happening automatically, and so she cannot even possibly imagine what the consequence of the fact is that she says, I want this press release only translated in English. Because now this is what you show your Chinese visitors. On your Chinese visitors, you see at the bottom left, you see a page with everything in Chinese, but the press release still in English. It's just a consequence of a procurement focus, marketing ignorance, and this is a website that you get. Whose mistake is it? It's nobody's mistake. It's not the mistake of localization management. It's not the mistake of marketing, because this is the connector that they got. They cannot see what is the consequence. Localization just translates whatever they get into their lab. But the end user, or if the marketing manager sees it, they think like, what is this? What is this? This is ridiculous. I spend millions. Elastic, I know them because they're Dutch. They spend millions to get a reputation in China going. And then you tell them here, you're not important to me because I don't even want to translate this press release, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. That is really not smart. It's not smart. Or Uber at the right. I mean, this is Uber in Arabic. Uber, of course, is very dynamic. The website is very dynamic. Again, multiple components. But you see here Arabic and English. Yeah? Why is that? Again, they needed to control the translation cost, probably. User experience is completely ignored. And this is the end result. The end user complains. Because here you see Arabic and American in the same page, on the top page as well. So what I would do? What I would do, and what we are trying now to bring to the game is, and this is a very bold statement, I think that what the industry is trying to solve is to make the processes easier to handle by having a more advanced TMS. I think the problem is in the TMS. It's a step that's not needed. And so a TMS could be better. Of course, the latest TMS is better than World Server, but the problem is in the TMS. The problem is in the process. The problem is in the process where we go from a marketing tool through a localization engineer to a TMS to an LSP. And that process is absolutely not needed. What we are trying to bring here is that we allow a environment where business tools, business applications can be directly connected to the LSP of choice. The localization manager would rule it, would govern it, would make the intelligent decisions. What is the quality level to which LSP? What is the price level that is actually applicable here? But within kind of the orchestrator in the middle. But we allow direct integration from the business tool to the LSP. And this way, the time the business is spending on sending it to your localization engineer, they can reduce that time probably to 1/3 by sending it directly to the LSP. And because now you allow the business to give them a tool to actually integrate directly to the LSP, you also give them the ability to embed translation at the core. You make translation energy. It's just electricity out of the socket. And because you give it to the business, right now, if you give it to the business to send it to a localization engineer before, he is always waiting. He's always too late. But if you give the tools in their hands, or you connect with it directly, if you want to do it for them, that's okay. But if you give the tools to them and you skip the localization engineer, you skip the TMS, you go straight to the LSP, and the localization manager are just the enablers and the value enablers as part of that, you really create, you actually allow value to be implemented. Yeah? If you stick to the current approach where you have a TMS, or as Mayu said, oh, we don't think that we need such a complicated TMS. No, of course not, because you don't need a TMS. Kick it out of the door, please, immediately, because that's the root cause of the problem. If you buy a TMS, you immediately put yourself on the second floor. Yeah? Because it's a staff design. It's a process where you are positioned as a staff. Yeah? If you give the tools to the business, you position yourself as business. It's what you want. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, you said that it was a bold statement. I would say it's a disruptive statement, because disruption is never easy to implement, and it's never easy to defend either. So when you say that, for instance, this is the way that a number of people do or try to create value, it's not the right way to go. You are disrupting actually their thinking in a way, right? That's what you mean with bold statement. You want to disrupt the way people think about, oh yeah, if I'm doing this, it's going to create value. So you are sort of, showing them another way, which is, really creating or really oriented towards value creation.
Exactly. Yeah.
That makes sense. So yeah, I think we'll get back to this picture. So keep it in at reach, I would say, because I'm sure when we will open the floor to questions, there will be a number of questions, and this picture can be really useful to answer some questions. So, but now, thanks a lot, Rickard, by the way, for explaining all that. And I think now I would like to move to Mayu. And I know, Mayu, that you have more than just a keen interest in user experience. And user experience, for me, is one of the best examples of value that you can create with a multilingual content supply chain. So, but that's my opinion. So I would like to ask you now to tell us more about how you connect, the delivery of compelling user experiences with actually, the impact of multilingual content supply chains. I'm sure you have a lot to tell about that.
I have so much to say about this. Where do I even begin? I think first of all, thank you, Rickard. That was absolutely fascinating and really interesting to listen to. I guess to get started on today's topic, this idea of our value supply chain being multilingual and localization being part of a value supply chain, I think that's actually something that isn't a given in every organization, and this is something that I've been reflecting on quite a bit lately, because I do recognize that this is and very much empathize with this, because I've had the same problem in the past, that localization teams struggle to sell localization in their organizations, so to speak. There is this set idea of what localization means and why it is done and how it is done. We're somewhat stuck very often, and it can be really challenging to sort of change that paradigm and reposition localization as a function that really delivers measurable value to any global business, really. And I think this, when it comes to user experience, it's such a great area to experiment and to use as an example, because there are many things that you can actually measure. When we talk about measuring localization and metrics, I think we usually, very often, we just talk about cost per word. There's so much around how you can make localization even faster, how it can take even less of your time, how it can be even cheaper. And obviously, in a business context, efficiency is very much a virtue, as we all know. But at the same time, isn't this how we make something almost like less painful. That's how we talk about a nuisance almost. That's how we talk about something really unpleasant that we want to reduce to something that, ideally we don't have to think about a lot. And I think that is the other side of that same coin. And as an industry, I feel we are a little bit guilty, in not necessarily doing a great job in our communication in our organizations. And when we evangelize this, the value of localization, we don't actually talk about the value that much. So to go back to user experience, this is actually how we kind of repositioned localization at What Three Words. And what I referred to in my introduction to actually learning from non-localization teams, these sort of iterative methods, which are iterative development, very that is the approach of tech teams, user experience, and product teams, and so on. And that's been really groundbreaking. We got started with very small experiments in App Store. So our product, you can use What Three Words either as an app or on our website. And we started doing these little localization experiments in some of our key markets. Changing value communication, kind of tailoring it more, changing our designs, changing the use case examples, or how we approach the description, how we describe What Three Words to the new users. And the app stores are a great place for this kind of experimentation, because they have these backend tools where you can easily set up A/B tests, and you get actual hard data on how the users are responding to what you're putting out there. And that is really powerful when you're able to say that we can boost our downloads by so and so many percent, sometimes even tens of percent. We can get to double digits. That is something that communicates actual value. And when I say that, repositioning localization as part of the actual value supply chain, it starts from this internal sense making. I think it is the data that we need to start focusing on, and it is the metrics that the non-localization teams who need localization, such as marketing has been mentioned many times, product teams equally, measuring user behavior and engagement. These are the metrics that we need to start using, and this is the language that we need to start using. So when a localization team is able to say, hey, in this particular country, we have done this thing that wasn't translation. We have started to tailor, for example, our messaging here, or the visual experience that our users get when they arrive on our App Store page. This is the actual, here is a chart. You can actually see how much more downloads we are getting. And in that interaction, through the data in interaction with these users, we're then able to iteratively further improve that user experience and boost those downloads or conversion rates or whatever it is that we are looking at in any given platform. So that's kind of where we got started, and we felt that there's certainly something here in this approach to localization that isn't so much of a tick a box and as cheaply and quickly as possible, please, and then forget about it. There is something, particularly in these, I would say, key conversion points. Obviously, the more you tailor for content for different languages and different markets, the harder it becomes to do it at scale. And obviously, that's something that we have to be mindful of as well. But particularly those most important, the key conversion points, whatever they are for each business, and obviously for everybody whose product is an app, the App Store is certainly one of them. Investing more resource into those and starting to, through this data, slowly starting to get the buy-in and being able to demonstrate through those numbers and those metrics that really make sense to other teams in an organization and that they really care about. I think that's really valuable. So that's where we got started, and since then it has this iterative approach where we tailor tailor the localized user experience or customer experience on different platforms. It has actually spread and been really inspiring in our organization across different teams, and we have very similar initiatives, not just this kind of app store optimization, similar initiatives across marketing, product marketing, product user experience, and so on, where people have really taken localization on and made it their own, I would say, which obviously is it's something that every localization team wants to see, that they aren't as I think Hartmut said earlier, that we don't just deliver translations. Our function and our purpose and the value that we add isn't just that there is this black box that a localization brief goes in and out comes a translation. There's so much more measurable value that we can deliver, and in hindsight and on reflection, I think it is specifically changing how we talk about localization and what metrics we associate with localization, such as cost per install, conversion rate, whatever it is that the business wants to measure and considers important. I think that's where it starts. That's how we can make, in my experience, localization actually part of that value supply chain, and that makes many other conversations a lot easier to have.
Absolutely.
And of course, delivers a better user experience.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm really glad you mentioned that user experience is value, because I've heard many people, in the past, but even nowadays, when they mention value or when they refer to value, they think about sales directly, purchases, and and you mentioned, of course, the role of UX or user experience in the conversion, between visitors and sales, or between visitors and customers. And I think that it's really important, and I'm going to make probably a slightly personal comment here. It's really important that when you talk about value, we talk about value in terms of business, because that's the name of the game. But before that, we need to create an experience that is going to generate business. And I think that's where UX comes to play a lot. And that's why I'm really glad you insist a lot on that, because I think that's really the best way to sometimes debunk some myth around value, and or to refocus the discussion on user experience before talking about conversion into customers, etc. But the question I wanted to ask you about your experience, because since you mentioned this topic of experience being part of the value, when you had to work with not just with your team but with other teams, did you come across people who were reluctant or skeptical to embrace your vision that user experience is part of the value? What has been your experience working with other people and pushing this vision forward?
I think it's the same as with anything that is new, and I dare say that this is new. There's always going to be resistance until people can, and change. As it's a human thing as well, we resist change. So yeah, definitely, I have experienced that, and I think it's it's hard to talk about user experience without in this context, without tying it into those metrics, into those conversion rates, because that's ultimately what I feel you will need to really show that there is something here, and this is something that we want to rethink, for example, and in many cases, such as in the app stores, the user experience, it does kind of no pun intended, but translate into the better the user experience, the better the conversion rates and the more downloads you get. So in that sense, they are kind of intertwined. But I think yeah, there is going to be resistance to speaking to anyone who'd be keen to try this sort of iterative localization approach. I think the key there is to start very small, and obviously when it is a new way of doing things, risk management is something that that is probably going to be of interest for many. In our case, just to give a bit more kind of practical advice on this topic, again, going back to the App Store, completely appreciate not everybody's product is in an App Store, but inviting everybody to think, what is your low risk platform? This is a place where you can experiment for free. First of all, it's a very low cost way to way to do these things and kind of play with the user experience and see how you can improve it. Starting very, very small. You can also, control the audience sizes, again, keeping the risk small, but also keeping the experiment small. So that's, again, really helpful in terms of getting, kind of winning people over almost, and getting that buy-in and getting that, okay, have a go, let's see what happens. Because then after that, I guarantee it's going to get a lot easier once you start getting that data and getting those numbers to kind of support your case. But yeah, so starting small and identifying that right platform where you can not only measure the impact, but also kind of control the audience, control the risk, and do, in this sense, very small scale experimentation at first.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was listening to you, I thought about all these discussions around why should we have a multilingual supply chain to sell products all around the world. And that's, for us, probably because we're all in Europe, it makes a lot of sense. But if you have to explain that to someone who is based in New York and who might say, I have the greatest product on the planet, I'm going to sell it, people are going to buy it because it's so great. But if they don't even understand that your product is great because it's not, your channel is not multilingual or your supply chain is not multilingual, nobody will know that your product is great because they will not understand. If somebody is based in Rome, in Italy, or in Madrid, in Spain, these people will probably not really understand where there is value in buying your product. And I think that's the sort of cultural factor that plays out. Because today we are lucky, we are all, by nature, we are all multicultural and multilingual because we are in Europe, and Europe is the region in the world with Asia Pac where people are mindful about multiple languages and multiple cultures. But I think there is still, I would say, the next step, which is to say to people who accept that indeed selling or making an impact with the business has to be multilingual, because otherwise there is no real impact. That step is maybe quite difficult. I think Rickard touched on the procurement teams. That's one of those audiences who might be quite difficult to convince, even though they understand, but they have to accept it. So I think that's the sort of the human factor. Yeah.
I actually think it is way simpler than that. It is. Let's take a different example. Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Okay, we need to do social media. And does all of these four work? Do I know that as a founder of Xilio? We're not a huge company. We're still like 50 people, so I have a company to run. Am I convinced that offering my website in 8 languages will drive more business? Yeah. Am I convinced that that Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook and all these will actually generate leads? Yes. But if I say A, I have to say B. And localization also has the image of being very complicated. So trying to convince them it works is like, yeah, of course. Just make it easy for them. Because it's a complexity that they fear, like, okay, I go on, if I use the Instagram example, I go on Instagram, but then I need to maintain Instagram for the next 5 years. and it is actually very complicated because then I need to create content every week. Now translate that to or make that thinking into translation. It's like if I translate into German, oh my God. If I talk to an expert, I'm already tired. Huh? I'm already tired trying because suddenly I get this complexity and that complexity. I need to provide it in this format. I only hear people talk about linguistic quality. Nobody ever talks about the experience quality. There's no pragmatic approach because everything smells complexity. Everybody knows, or everybody, not everybody, but most business people know there's value. But if the image of complexity stays, then it's very, very difficult.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I think, yeah, when you hear the word supply chain, the word supply chain itself is sort of smelling complexity, to use your expression, because a supply chain is, well, it sounds like, okay, you have to align a number of phases, a number of steps, a number of people to make it happen. And obviously, you know, I think there is a that many people use, and they say, well, you know, the shorter a supply chain is, the better it is. And, you know, to your point, simplicity can bring a lot of value as well, since we talk about value, indirectly probably, but still value in the way people are, you know, implementing and using the multilingual supply chain itself. So yeah, I'm sure we'll circle back on that in a few minutes when we open the floor to questions. And by the way, I would like to remind the audience that they can put their questions in the chat, and we'll open the floor, as I said, in a few minutes for questions and answers, of course. But now I would like to allow Hartmut to share his experience. And Hartmut, if you can also share your experience regarding the I would say, the pain points that you went through, because we all like, of course, to share great experiences, but I'm pretty sure that you've gone through some pain for yourself or for your team regarding, you know, the implementation of a value creating supply chain.
Definitely, Bruno. Just a second. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I like the thought-provoking ideas that have been shared, specifically by Rickard and Mayu. And I fully agree that you need to make it as simple as possible for your stakeholders, for the ones that drive the goals that are dependent on the value that you create as a localization organization, or that localization itself creates. And for that, I would also like to call out or trigger some out-of-the-box thinking by calling out really what I believe is the next step that all localization needs to do. And that is stop optimizing the localization value chain. So that's what we've done for years. Yeah, localization has been viewed as there is a process, there's a value chain that might be complex or not, and it is a cost factor. Yeah. We have this great product, we are delivered to our core market, and now we want to go international. So we are adding and multiplying costs with each market that comes in, that we add to our market landscape. And though there's a big desire to keep this process fast, reliable, and cost sensitive. But I fully agree that on that route, we usually forget about what the value is that we would like to create. And so stop optimizing this localization value chain. Step back and think about what you can do instead of focusing on existing workflows, existing relationships, existing requirements, known gaps, and trying to optimize them, add another language, and at the same time reduce the cost for the overall thing. We're really trying to speed things up to be more efficient and reduce cost, but this doesn't necessarily lead to growth. We're not measuring how that impacts growth. Yeah? And it doesn't automatically maximize the business impact if you just make your value supply chain multilingual or optimize it or whatever. So how can we create real value? And that's really, we need to become more customer obsessed. And that's exactly what Mayu explained. They are looking at how does localization impact the customer or the user experience. I take a step further, I go for the customer experience because we are looking at the whole experience that a customer has in its life cycle. So if we want, as we are a SaaS company delivering SaaS products, and if we want to attract people, we need to serve them and serve localized content, which doesn't necessarily mean translation. We need to get them where they are, attract them, get them, then convert them to customers, yeah, and then delight them, because otherwise their customer life cycle is done and they hop to the next product. So how can we as a localization, or how can localization help to spin that product-led growth flywheel? That's the key question. The tools that we use don't really matter. Yeah? And if we can eliminate any tools and hide the complexity from our internal stakeholders, that's all good. We need to do that. But first we need to step back and look at what is the value that we create and how can we create the most value for the different markets. Yeah? So you need to know what markets are you targeting and why are you targeting them? Are we as a localization team driving that? Are we involved, or are we just executing the content localization for those specific markets? Do we know what level of localization is necessary for the markets that we are targeting? In which state? How can we categorize this? Where do we have gaps? And so ultimately, I believe we need to wrap up our sleeves and really try to truly understand our customers. That's the absolute key here. And that's what Mayu does. They are running small experiments, gathering data, running A/B tests, figuring out what works, what not, instead of making everything multilingual, whole content. If I would need to localize every content that we have for marketing, product, and care, that would just not be possible, because and here comes the procurement again into place, or the financial department, because that would just be too expensive without creating the necessary value. So we really need to look at what is creating the value with our customers, with our international customers. How can we attract, engage, and delight them? How can we make them champions, evangelizing our products? So what we are doing, or starting to do, so we're not yet there, we're on our journey, is with every product launch that is coordinated globally, one of the first questions that we ask is, how do we measure success? How do we measure success in the US for this product launch? Which means, what are the criteria that we need to look after? And then we can decide how we optimize or how we design our localization value chain to support the same goals. But we need to work, and we're working with our data teams and our internal stakeholders to understand those metrics and to help them track them on a by market level. Because if they are tracked globally, that's not really helpful. If you don't get insights into your data for how the product performs in Germany after you have whatever applied proper SEO to 30 pages, if you don't track and measure that, then maybe you just repeat the step for all the other countries. And Rickard just said it. Yes, as an entrepreneur, you know that this will help, but do you really know it? Can you measure it? And can you decide to do something else if it doesn't work? Can you stop things that don't work? These are the thoughts that we need to have and drive forward. Whereas optimizing how we do it is a natural thing. That's operations. We need to do it. We need to execute all these kind of things. And when we can make it easier, everything is good. But first thing is on what is the value that we are creating? How can we figure out whether something that we do is helping our customers, is keeping them, is growing our customers, is creating value for the customers? And how is it improving the local experience for our customers? So first and foremost, we need to learn from our customers and really then identify the next best steps that we need to take to make their experience better, and then measure it and figure out whether it works. And do small steps. Don't boil the ocean and do the whole thing, because it will just be too big. You will need too long, and then at the end you will find out that half of it is not working as expected, or not creating the value that you expected from it. So think about what's the difference if you have limited resources. Is retention a big thing that you need to look after? Is attracting, so it's the marketing side of the house, the big thing that you need to look after. So where can you create more value? By attracting new customers or by retaining the existing ones if you're in a SaaS model? If you don't care for the customers in their retention phase and don't help them, delight them so that they will renew their contracts on a monthly or annual basis, they will be gone, and you have to invest way more effort on the marketing side to get new customers on board. And I really try to encourage localization managers and leaders to think that way. What is helping your internal, what is helping the customers? First focus on the customers, and then figure out what matters to the different stakeholders that you have internally, and educate them and help them to create, to get the value out of what they're paying for.
That's excellent. And first of all, thanks, Hartmut, for reminding us. But I think we all know that about that already, that language technology enables the creation of value. It doesn't actually, directly create value itself. So that's the very first point you reminded. And the second point that you made is also great, which is that actually, making an impact or creating value with a multilingual supply chain makes sense mostly, or sometimes only, if it is customer centric, if it is customer driven and data driven, because obviously this is all about data. And I think this is a great point, because in the past I heard or I saw some announcements from some companies saying that, we have a website in 25 different languages, and they considered that as an achievement. But the question was, why 25 languages? Maybe you could have created more value for your business by considering only 15 languages, because these 15 languages would have generated more business than the 25. So it is
exactly
to your point, it requires some due diligence that some people, specifically, I guess in marketing, in my experience, they try to rush to the gold mine and say, yeah, you know, we need a website or we need a platform or an application in so many languages because we're going to be international. But being international, being visible internationally, doesn't create value internationally immediately. So you have to understand where you go, and when you made the point about targeting, you know, where optimization should go, because at the end of the day, and this is to circle back on what Rickard mentioned before, you know, you can do more with less, and you can generate more value with less complexity, or with, you know, less broad, you know, initiatives, well-targeted initiatives. So yeah, I think all that is really great. That's yeah.
Can I step in here? I'd like to make a comment as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
I think Hartmut, it's absolutely brilliant, and I fully agree. But I have one comment. I think you created an extra job, and so it's a very needed role within every enterprise, and that role could be fulfilled by a localization manager, but it's and basically. So one does not go without the other, because at the end of the day, there still needs to be a team that manages the actual execution of the translation. And so you still need to do it, so you can make the team bigger. So I think it's fantastic, but it should be end, and it's another role.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm advocating for. And I've talked to many peers in my situation, and we don't see this role very often. So it's not very common. So it's a typical thing. You have a localization department, they're taking care, they're executing, they're in the execution mode, they're optimizing, they provide guidance. But if you really want to mature that and to drive growth for the company, if you want to position localization as a growth enabler, then you need to grow into a globalization function. And where localization, the execution of localization is just a part of it.
Yep. These are really great points, and I agree. We need to look at what we do holistically, and not just rush to the gold mine, as I keep saying. You know, sort of looking at the glittering prize and being sensible. So yeah, that's absolutely necessary. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I can give a quick example to what we just discussed in the past 2 minutes. So that's, you made a great point, Bruno, that some companies have, or marketing teams are going to be broad and add languages and thinking, okay, that's the holy grail and that will drive business. But usually that's a very small focus. It probably helps on attracting people. Mm-hmm. But then what? Even if you create the perfect buying experience and onboarding the customers, they might figure out that your product is not supporting the same set of languages. Or that even if your product is supporting it, maybe your support experience is not supporting that, which then pays into retention. So you create a big, expensive machinery that attracts a lot of customers to put something into the funnel, instead of focusing on keeping the customers. And we recently introduced machine translation to do, or to provide localized support content. But we didn't do that for the reason that we said, okay, machine translation is state of the art, we should do something about it. And oh yeah, well, it reduces cost. Yeah. That was not the main driver. So we figured out that we didn't fully localize the support experience. And the support experience, based on researchers, is very important for our customers. Yeah? So it's sometimes more important than the marketing experience.
Absolutely.
And so it can be a critical buying factor if you focus on the right thing and provide it there. And okay, how can you create that value if you have limited resources? One option is introduce machine translation. There might be others as well. It doesn't matter which one you select, as long as you create the value that you need.
Exactly. Very good example. I like this this example with support content, because it's one of those segments or categories of content that are really you can have the best experience or the worst, to be honest. Well, that's my experience, but I see that all around me. People are complaining about this support content is just awful, or they just say look at the support that I got for my product, for my service. And I think that makes a great experience, again, to go back to that topic, but definitely. Yeah, I would like to open now the floor to questions from the audience. I don't see any question in the chat, but if attendees in the audience would like to ask any question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question directly, so we listen to you. Is there no question from the audience? Don't be shy. You can unmute yourself. You don't have to switch on your webcam if you don't want you to be seen, but feel free to ask now, because I don't see any question in the chat anyway.
Hello, it's Aoife here from Vistatech. Hi, everyone.
Hello, Eve.
I have a quick question for you, Hartmut. I'm just very interested to hear about your ideas on how to measure success with your business stakeholders, and that you had you find out what success looks like to them, and then you build your goals around that, and then you measure yourself against those goals using metrics. Do you have just one example of the type of metric that you have used to show what success looks like in that scenario?
Yeah, let's focus on the support content. So our support department is measuring, for example, whether customers escalate. So if usually customers have a problem, the first thing that we want to provide is a self-help. So we provide great content which target is to if somebody visits the content, they should be able to solve their issues or most of the issues. So there's a big goal to reduce the escalations in terms of, okay, this I can't find any help in the web pages, so I will pick up the phone and call a human and try to get some help there. So if you measure this escalation rate, for example, then you can see whether this escalation rate goes down once you start localizing content for a specific market. That's a very easy one to do, but you need to have a system that measures or tracks these things.
Example, thank you.
Hi, my name is Hia. I have a question for Rickard. I'm sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing your name.
Correct.
Thank you. Really interesting presentation. I'd like to confirm that then the way you're envisioning it, the CMS connector for the LSPs, those would be connecting into the LSP's TMSs, because it's supposed to be agnostic, right?
Correct. Yeah, correct. So the thing is here, that localization is very, very, very complex. And by going through an enterprise TMS, you bring the complexity to the business. And by going directly from the CMS to the TMS, but at the LSP side, you hide the complexity for the enterprise. So that is so you're absolutely correct. So it's not that a TMS can be avoided, but the enterprise TMS has to be avoided, because localization is still complex and it needs to be integrated and dismantled and translated and put back together, etc. So that is what a TMS is good for. It should not just be at the enterprise side.
Got it. Thank you.
Unless your LSP is working in the enterprise TMS.
Yeah, then you have to. Yeah, correct.
But I agree. There needs to be one and not two, because feeding everything into one TMS and then from there to another TMS and then to the translator is a few steps too much.
Yeah. No, but also, I mean, it is confusing. That's one, but it's also I know that digital agents are spending more time sending content. So to put it into perspective, and this is a live example, so this should absolutely be. But I know of a consulting house that spends more time preparing content to go from Tridion to World Server than to go if you connect content from Tridion directly to the LSP. So it's about there is simply more time wasted preparing the content to send it to a TMS, and there it's still picked up by a localization engineer. Then to actually bypassing that process and then sending it directly to the LSP.
Any additional question from the audience? Seems that I saw one of the names flashing on my screen. I'm not sure if somebody wanted to make a comment. It doesn't have to be a question, it might be a comment. So feel free to do so. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment. No? Well, in that case, I would like to ask Mayu, actually. Mayu, what is your perspective about what we just discussed here, about the impact of, skipping the enterprise TMS? Because it's not, from my perspective, it's of course a technical topic, but it's not only a technical topic, it's part of your supply chain. And I'm curious to know from your experience, how you see the role of the TMS to deliver the value as customer experience.
Oh, that's not a small question.
No.
Do you know what? I think we are actually very new to using a TMS at all. We do have one, and I'm going to go against Rickard's advice a little bit and not throw it out the window. However, I will say that we don't use it for content localization. It's simply to simplify. Given the number of our languages, is simply to simplify the administration related to briefing and delivering that many translations in that many languages, and the connectors that come with our TMS, they work really well for our purposes. But what I will say on this topic is that we were very, very late to implementing a TMS. I definitely raised or saw a lot of raised eyebrows when I talked about our localization processes and workflows and said that we don't have a TMS. And I think what we shouldn't be doing is taking these things at face value and just assuming that because everyone else has a TMS, we should also have a TMS, or potentially multiple systems and different technologies at use, I think we need to be really intentional and really critical about what is actually needed. In our case, that looked a bit like, we looked at TMSs and kind of dissected what the process will look like, what steps are still required when we use a TMS, and how we were currently completing those steps. And for the longest time, there just wasn't any extra value. It was literally only when we reached the sort of like really high number of languages and these we needed a platform to work for our teams, localization and development teams, to work cross-functionally together and with the translators on the user interfaces. That's where the additional value was, and that was the moment for us to go like, okay, now there is value. Now we go to this direction and implement this tool. But otherwise, I can't say I'm super experienced in this kind of technology, because I think we have always had this quite a critical approach to it, and in that sense been careful in what kind of tools we allow into our processes, I would say. So in that sense, I'm very much in agreement with Hartmut and Rickard on this topic, and yourself, Bruno. Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions from the audience? Again, feel free to unmute yourself. You can do that right away. You don't need us to unmute you. Okay, then I have a question. I have more questions, but I'm just looking at the clock as well, because we don't have to take more time for the audience. But I have a question which is for the three of you, actually, because I'm sure you have at least one piece of advice or one recommendation to make. If you were talking today to a localization manager, let's imagine that I'm a localization manager, and I'm just starting in the industry, in the language industry, whether it's on the language technology industry or the language services industry. What sort of advice would you give me in order to position multilingual content supply chains as a true value creator and a value booster sometimes? What sort of advice would you give to somebody who is really unexperienced and potentially candid, like me today? Not sure who wants to start. Maybe Rickard?
I'm still thinking. So
Okay.
maybe someone else can start.
Okay. Hartmut?
Yeah, I'd say really start embracing your customers, like I mentioned before. Learn what you're doing and why you're doing it. Don't figure out the exact details of execution. That's what you should know. That's your bread and butter. But really think about who is creating or who is requesting translations. What are their goals? How can you help them achieve their goals?
Yeah.
And how can you make their life easier, as Rickard mentioned in the very beginning, in his opening. A content creator or somebody who's responsible for managing the company website, the marketing websites, they don't want to think about and have complex processes to get translation triggered. It's usually often complicated enough for them to think about localization at all, because they're focused on content creation, and then for them, very often, the localization is an afterthought still. Yeah. So localization needs to be, so getting multilingual web pages is something that they accept needs to be done, but they don't want to have a big effort with that. So make their life easier. Ask them how you can make their life easier. Put yourself into their shoes. What matters to them? And then figure out how they measure success.
Yep.
Yeah, I would add to that almost more generic, kind of watch your language. So when Mayu and I were competing at the Process Innovation Challenge, she showed an example of conversion, which in the Facebook app of like 3 times better conversion. The moment you start talking that language, it's like everybody wants to talk to you, because every business person is dying for confirmation what works, and he wants to multiply on that immediately. And there is such a strong force in the localization industry that pulls you in the wrong direction. That talks about linguistic quality, that talks about all kind of those things. Everything that a business person thinks about, like when a business person hears linguistic quality, what he hears is trouble. He hears high cost, slow, trouble, difficult. He will say very polite, yes, very important. But what he thinks is trouble. If a business person comes, if a localization manager comes to you and talks about a data lake, or talks about an example about 3 times higher conversion, you're immediately like boom. It's like it's day and night. And so my advice would be watch your language. And of course try to make it easier always helps, and that's a huge thing, but just be a peer is the most important.
Great.
Agree.
Yeah.
And it's a big thing, because as a localization manager, you're in the middle of everything.
It's an ideal spot.
You need to understand and talk many languages, business languages internally. You need to talk different and address different things with marketing folks, with the web marketing folks, than with the demand gen marketing folks. And again, you need to talk a different language if you're talking to software engineering or product UX.
Yeah, that is spot on, and every localization manager has to look at linguistic effectiveness, cultural effectiveness, to make sure that the culture of the audience is taken into account, and more functional effectiveness, to make sure that the content in multiple languages works as well in different ecosystems or in different products. So yeah, it's a tough job. It has become tougher with all the facets of content, but and all these facets, I mean, linguistic, cultural, and functional, are really driving the customer experience. They are really, if you have the greatest content in German, but if the content doesn't work in your platform, people will not even consider it. So that's another one. But talking about user experience, Mayu, what would be your advice to me, young localization manager?
You know what? I think 100% everything Rickard and Hartmut said. I think that is the great paradox of the localization industry, that we don't always speak the right language ourselves. So as Hartmut said, identifying, speaking to the other teams and identifying helping identify their problems and helping identify how, like, where you fit in that equation, and what are the metrics in which localization success needs to be measured. I think that's really, really important. I think the only thing I would add that hasn't been mentioned here, which might be one for, you know, a slightly later stage, perhaps when, you know, these communication channels are open and localization perhaps is a bit more established in the organization. When it comes to user experience, we have to remember that it is not just about language. Any visual element that we include is also a big part of the experience, and it is something that we mustn't forget when we localize. And I think very often people think localization is it equals translation or transcreation, but in any way it is a very language focused operation, and this simply is a big part, but it isn't the whole truth. So I would advise to keep that in mind.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I fully agree, and language is of course very important, but today, to your point, it's much more than that. I mean, it's the way you use your language and the cultural effectiveness and the functional effectiveness. I mean, recently I've seen a great application working functionally. It was perfect, well, from my perspective, but the content in French, which is my mother tongue, was just awful. And I didn't want to use this perfect application because the content in French was just terrible. And I said, no, sorry, it's technically, I have nothing to say, but linguistically, whoa, what a shame, you know? And, you know, you can spoil a whole product by ignoring one of the facets of the content, which is language, culture, and function. So that's, but yeah, it's definitely a huge challenge for all localization managers. Time flies once again. So I would like to thank all panelists today, Rickard, Hartmut, Mayu. Thank you very much for accepting this invitation, for making some time in your busy schedules to join us.